Welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. The topic for today is a title that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Very excited to finally have it in. And this is Charles Rouse's 2 is 1, originally put out on the Strata East label. So that's what we're going to be talking about. As always, of course, please do hit like, subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more content that's like this, as well as some of my upcoming reviews of the other titles that Mack Avenue is putting out from the Strata East label. And as always, you can follow me on Instagram as well. I'm at what_can_brown. So Mack Avenue, maybe a familiar label to some folks, maybe not to others, and I wanted to just kind of cover that up front. So Mack Avenue first came, at least to my attention, just a few years back with their participation in Record Store Day, and I want to say the title was Oscar Peterson's On a Clear Day. So I remember I made a video for YouTube covering the releases for Record Store Day, and I said, I don't know who Mack Avenue is. It looks like they've done mostly CDs. And you know, I know that probably sounds condescending, but hey, you know, us vinyl people can be a pretty weird bunch. Well, cut to now, they definitely had some credentials that I wasn't aware of at the time. But certainly if people didn't know them before, you're going to know them now going forward. And why I say that is because Mack Avenue is reissuing some selections from a label that I think many of us in this space, in this kind of jazz appreciation, you know, vinyl collecting space that exists here on YouTube and elsewhere, it's a label that many of us hold sort of very dear to our hearts, and that is Strata East. So this particular release that Mack Avenue is putting out, as well as actually each of these, are being done in collaboration with Ched Tolliver, who operates the label today. He is the son of Charles Tolliver, who was one of the founding members of the label, along with Stanley Cowell. So otherwise, if I'm thinking about maybe some of the high-level sort of stats of this particular release, very, very well done. You can just tell from the outset, you know, both the sort of high-quality hype sticker, the gatefold jacket is very nice, you know, sort of tip-on style. There's some helpful liner notes inside. 180 gram. Let's see, the mastering is done by Kevin Gray, transferred from the original master tapes, right? So all of kind of the pieces are coming together, the hallmarks of quality that a lot of us like to see when we think about, you know, well-done reissue campaigns, right? And as an aside, one thing that I did want to reference, because like, especially when the original recording is done so well, I don't just want to say, oh, Kevin Gray's doing the remastering. I want to call out. So Bill Robertson and Craig Brewster Bishop are the recording engineers on this record. I think mostly Bill Robertson with some assistance from Craig Brewster Bishop. So I did want to call them out because, gosh, especially, like, I mean, the whole thing is obviously recorded quite well, but there's a couple of standout tracks in particular that I'm gonna cover here in just a little bit, as well as in fact the lineup. So the lineup does have some intricacies or some slight differences from track to track. So I'll kind of call out at least you know, some of the musicians, I guess, as I start talking about the instruments. All right, so I know I'm presupposing that everybody's familiar with and excited about Strata East, the label, but maybe not everybody is as familiar. So just a little bit of quick history. So the label was launched in 1971, as I mentioned, by Stanley Cowell and Charles Tolliver, starting with a couple of albums by the group that was known as Music Inc. or Music Incorporated, including their self-titled release, as well as the Live at Slugs album. So that Live at Slugs album is actually one of the other titles that is included in this first batch of really 4 titles that Mack Avenue and Strata East are putting out. So I will be covering Live at Slugs in a different video. So some of the other titles though that were released, you know, in that, call it, first year or so, were titles by Clifford Jordan, Warren Smith, and others. Now, 1974, which is when this Charles Rouse album was put out, really was the label's most prolific year. And I actually didn't precisely count them, but I think something like 20 releases, maybe even more than that. And like I said, 2 is 1 by Charles Rouse is indeed one of them. So the label's mission, I believe, as far as I can tell, was to kind of empower the musicians to do their own thing and be in control of their own art. You know, they weren't unique in that regard, but I think that some of the other labels that were also doing that, say like an ESP disc, was around the same time, and I think had a similar mission and was similarly reactive to how musicians have been treated by labels in the past. And so, this idea of being in control of your own music, being able to own the sort of the compositional credits, and all of that was not something that musicians traditionally could take for granted, especially in the jazz space. So that was felt to me like some of the driving force behind this label starting out. My personal first exposure to this label was Cecil McBee's Mutima, which I probably downloaded on Napster in college. So I was surrounded by people, very interested in jazz and playing jazz, and I certainly was both of those things. And many of us were taking courses with Anthony Braxton and Jay Hogarth, and the school that I went to, Wesleyan University, had really an impressive history in terms of musicians that they attracted, brought to campus, had either as visiting professors, full professors, etc. And who were providing such a significant education to students over the years. So my interest kind of evolved, I think, and I was sort of pointed into in different directions from not only the professors there but also the people I was surrounded with, taking courses with, and one of those labels that we kind of got into and sort of explored a little bit was Strata East. So as much as today they have this kind of lore that I think is certainly a credit to the quality of the music, and then we can't ignore that the sort of the collector element has driven the prices of some of these up pretty considerably, which I think is one of the reasons why Mack Avenue partnering with Strata East right now for some of these reissues is just so exciting to so many of us. So you may be wondering, as I talk through some of these tracks and kind of give you my thoughts, how does it compare to the original pressing? Well, this is one of those very few examples. As you look around my room and see the number of records, this is one of those few examples where I do not have a copy, never have, and honestly, an original is probably out of reach. So at this point, now I do have probably about 30, 35 records from the maybe that's right. Gosh, that sounds high, but I think I have somewhere around 30 records from the Strata East catalog, but unfortunately this is not one of them, not from lack of trying. So I'm not going to be able to address how it compares to the original, but what I am going to be able to address is simply how does it sound, and what's my reaction to really hearing this on vinyl for the first time, and probably hearing it for the first time in a really long time too. So I'm going to walk through each of the tracks and kind of give you some brief thoughts. My intent is not necessarily to fully dissect them, but kind of give some gut reaction, just so we keep this video a little bit more contained. So the first track is by the guitarist George Davis, who plays on this track as well, and the title is Bitchin'. So the very first thing that hit me about this track, and I can say this even compared to all the other tracks on the record, although there is a couple of other like high points that are similarly amazing. What hit me is how dynamic it is and how great it sounds. Like it's so many of the sonic elements. So Martin Rivera's bass is just really distinct. Not like resonating like it's boomy or something, but just really punchy. Now, I did have my subwoofer on, and in fact, I turn on I know a lot of people who listen to jazz on vinyl don't necessarily have a subwoofer or don't believe they need one. And I ended up getting one because of, well, probably situations like this, where the subwoofer just added so much, like, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it, if it's like warmth or what have you, but it kind of like envelops you a little bit. And again, it wasn't like it was distracting. It was just, this was an example of a track that really could use that sub. And I was just surprised at how much this particular track activated it. So sonically, this track, Bitchin', is perhaps the best on the album, even if I like some of the other pieces better, right? So sonically, possibly the best. So George Davis and Paul Metzke, I believe is his name, both play guitar. And so when I talk about, the guitar sounding great, I confess I actually don't know which one, but I think that George Davis was playing more of the, call it lead guitar, and Paul Metzke may have been playing perhaps rhythm. I'm not exactly sure, but just really, really glorious sound, really nice, crisp sound to the guitar. And I think, my reaction in listening to this, especially given that I've been DJing a lot lately, is I could really see this one being spun by a DJ, and in fact, I probably will use it the next time I put together a set list. All right, second track is called Hopscotch. This one is a Joe Chambers composition. I'm actually not sure if he ever performed it, at least on a recording, and nor does he actually play in this, in the lineup here. But he did contribute the composition Hopscotch. This one sort of has a like a pulse, or like a real sense of almost like a heartbeat to it. And in some ways, I'm going to say that it feels like it's a little bit of an evolution of what was going on with Miles's early electric period. So when I hear this, I think, maybe the track Honky Tonk from Get Up With It. Not as much in terms of melody. It's not to say that it's that exactly at all. But I feel like the spirit behind the backing and that kind of heartbeat and that sort of propels the piece is something that, I don't know. I just felt like there was something similar going on, or that's where my mind went when I heard it. And I think it isn't just I guess like a pulse that's provided by bass or something like that. There's this kind of repeating snare and cymbal line that I think, coupled with the bass, gives it that feel, and I think it's fantastic. This one sounds just a little bit, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but like dirtier. Like if the first track was like really clean and crisp and like again I could hear it being spun at at a club or something. This one is a little bit more of that grittier, like 1973-74 kind of sound that, again, is probably something that I'm reminded of because of my familiarity with some of Miles Davis's work that I think had a similar kind of quality to it. The third track is actually the shortest one on the album, and in some ways you kind of want it to be the longest because it's so good. So this one is another one by George Davis, who also did the first one, and you can tell, I think, even just between these two tracks, that he just has a way of composing that keeps the beat front and center. This one's definitely funky. It gives Charles Rouse's playing almost like a vocal kind of character to it because of how expressive he plays. It's really interesting. Like when you hear it, think of maybe that comment, or just process, listen to it however you want to listen to it. But that was something that kind of occurred to me, is that Rouse had this almost, like I said, vocal kind of character to how he played. I also thought that George Davis's guitar was just really well suited here. He incorporates some effects that I think are really cool. So moving on to side two, things do kind of shift just a little bit because there's two tracks on side two, and both are somewhat expansive. I think in that like 12-minute kind of range. So 2 is 1 is the first track on side 2, and it's the first piece that is a original by Charles Rouse, as well as Roland Hanna. So this one, to me, starts out almost sounding like a chase sequence, and I hope people can kind of forgive me that I like to point to things that are that remind me about what the music is, because again, when I don't have an original to compare it to, I'm going to talk less about how this sounds versus that, and instead it's like, how does it make you feel, right? So this one to me sounds a little bit more like a chase sequence. The bass line is this kind of driving thing that has an effect that makes it sound like it's almost slowing down at a spot with each repeating phrase. So it's kind of like repeating phrase, right? And just for a moment, it sounds like it's like slowing down, which kind of takes you off guard. And I knew, as a result of that feel, which gives it almost a sense of uneasiness, there was a complicated rhythm going on. And after hearing it, I went back to the liner notes and the gatefold for more information about like who was playing, and I saw it noted that the first section of the track is played with 3 different tempos simultaneously. And I think that's what helped sort of create that both that sense of unease, as well as like, is it slowing down there for a minute? So the reason it sounded like it was slowing down is because the bass is in 9/8, and so that I'll kind of leave that there. The drums are in 6/8, and the cello and tenor are in 3/4. So if you're following, like, you might say, well, 3/4, 6/8, like, aren't those the same? But not quite, because of how the beats are grouped, as well as where the emphasis is. So the effect, anyway, of this, independent of the fact that there's, again, these kind of three different rhythms coming together in the first section. There's a bit of dissonance here with the layering of the instruments that are kind of playing across these different time signatures, and it's just very interesting. It's a very different feel, I think, than the first half of the album, which was a little bit more funk forward. So after a little bit, a new rhythm is established with bass and what sounds to me at least like Shakir accents that give it a kind of, what I call like a spacey feel, like an outer space kind of feel to it. And that's kind of, I don't know, if you listen to, other sort of post-bop or spiritual jazz music, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. But this second section has the rhythm in 7/8 and the cello in tenor in 4/4. So very interesting in terms of playing with some of these different time signatures. So if you read the material in the gatefold, what you'll find is that the album's title and this track was named for an expression by, I think it was coined by Thelonious Monk, which is at least described as like a sense of unity and like interconnectedness is how the liner notes put it. And I think with the piece separated in these two sections, each with its own sense of time, but they merge together in a single piece. I mean, yeah, like I don't need to beat a dead horse on this. I think you get the idea. All right, so the final piece is titled "In His Presence Searching." This one is written by David Lee. So if I were to classify this one in terms of like the theme or like how it sounds, I would say that it has a very ominous feel. So there's like stretched out notes by cello and bass that almost give it a little bit of a classical kind of vibe to it. But I think that the choices of notes almost lean more to like Middle Eastern or Indian music in a way. And there's even actually what sounded to me like a harpsichord, but I actually think could be the guitarist Paul Metzke playing just, I don't know, with an effect to make his guitar sound like almost like a harpsichord. And so it's very interesting, kind of these different themes or these different sort of tonal qualities kind of coming together. At one point, the music sort of fades out, and then a new rhythm is established, and Rouse is playing this like really sort of glorious, energetic solo. I have to say though that like as this piece kind of unfolds, it's kind of trippy in a way. Maybe that's the best way to put it. But I don't know, maybe that kind of shortchanges it. It's definitely heady music though, and I think to the point of the title has sort of a searching kind of quality to it. All right, so we got this far in the video and I realized I didn't really show you that much of the cover, so let me do that one more time. I did just want to address that the cover, I think they did a great job representing the original. You do have the liner notes on the back as well as some new content and pictures because this format is a gatefold. So super high quality. Same goes for the vinyl. No issues with, it arrived flat. There's no distortion, any quality control issues, nothing like that. So, I think my first experience with this collaboration between Mack Ave and Strata East was Azifo Zam, which came out during Record Store Day, and I was able to get in these next three titles. So all are available now. You don't have to worry about placing a pre-order. You can go and check them out. I wanted to start with Charles Rouse because this is the one that I was the least familiar with, and I was just so excited about kind of diving in and hearing this for the first time. And I have to say that as much as sometimes my commentary can sound a little clinical and maybe void of emotion because I'm looking for words to describe like, what it is we're talking about without just saying fantastic. So I know that I have that tendency, but I hope what is communicated is how pleased I am with this release. It sounds absolutely phenomenal. This is going to be something that I'm certainly going to get repeated spins, and especially in this day and age when the original is so out of reach. I can't imagine though that the original sounds better than this reissue. This is just, it's phenomenal. And again, I'm excited to start folding in, especially that title track into my DJ set. So I'm definitely going to be doing that. So hopefully some of this commentary was helpful for some of you. And otherwise, stay tuned for some follow-up videos on these other releases. And I'll see you next time.